Hey everybody, welcome to the Dad Challenge podcast. My name is Josh. Today we're talking more about the 8 passengers Ruby Franke situation. I've been wanting to cover this video for a little while. I have not seen it yet, but it's the prosecutor talking about the deal that he made and the whole case and all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to really try to understand this from a legal perspective because I'm obviously taking this from a human perspective because I don't know anything about the law, right? I'm a pleb. But what pisses me off is that I think he made the deal that when it comes time for her to have her parole hearing, he's not going to step in and say anything. And I need to understand why prosecutors make deals like this when there's so much evidence that can convict them. So I'm going to take a look at this video. Law and Crime did it, and we're going to see what he has to say, and we're going to take a look. So let's do it. So yeah, Law and Crime, I think, interviewed the prosecutor and they did this little video. So let's take a look at it real quick and then again, I'm really going to try to take a look at this from not be super pissed about the why she's not being convicted or anything like that. Because it's angering me that in 4 years, less than 4 years, she could literally get out because this guy, by decree, signed the thing. He's not going to step in and do anything. So there won't be any pressure from a prosecutor to say she needs to stay in jail. Now, I think the deal is that they made is that they're going to not do that for Jody. Jody didn't make the same deal, but Ruby did. So, and don't forget, Ruby said I have enough to put her away for life. So maybe Ruby had that in the deal that she created. She's like, look, I'll testify against her, blah, blah, blah. But both of them pled guilty. There was not really any, there was no court. There was no jury, nothing. It was just like, okay, you're guilty. Here's 3 years. I feel like when the court system rewards people who are like, well, yeah, I'm guilty, and they take blame. And I understand why they do that. But if you're guilty of heinous crimes, you should be spending the time in prison for that heinous crime, not the minimum amount because you were good enough to say, yeah, you were, again, manipulated the system because Ruby's smart. She manipulated it all the way from the phone calls up from what we've seen so far. And it's just getting crazier. So let's take a look at this video.
Everybody who has worked on this case has gone home and cried.
The lead prosecutor in the Ruby Franke case tells all, speaking with Law and Crime for the first time since these chilling videos were made public.
That girl just said she's going to cry because she takes a look at this kid and has to walk away. This is insane. The girl in the closet, was in there for hours and hours before they could coax her out of there. Because these kids inherently don't trust the police because of what the mom has told them not to trust the police. Right? And when we do the Pam Botcher video a little bit, we'll figure that hopefully this week, you'll see too that these kids are like groomed to like be scared of the police, which is crazy. So yeah, you're seeing all this because it's horrific.
Washington County Attorney Eric Clark tells us the case is unlike anything he's ever seen before.
Child abuse to this degree is something that is super abnormal.
So I'm going to say this because this is my human pleb side that doesn't know anything about the law. If you say this, if you agree that that's child abuse like this is insane, then why would you agree to not trying to put her away for longer? Like, why would you agree to say, I'm not going to step in?
Clark first heard the name Ruby Franke in summer 2023 after she and Jody Hildebrandt were arrested. But Clark quickly became familiar with both women and the gruesome ways they abused Franke's 2 youngest children.
Like, I don't know that any of us have ever had a case where you have someone who, in that level of detail, is cataloging their criminal acts.
Before we saw either of these mugshots, we saw Ruby Franke on her YouTube channel, 8 Passengers.
This scene that they keep showing is one of the most famous scenes. If you don't know why they keep showing the scene, it's one of the most heartbreaking scenes you've seen of abuse and her laughing at her children. In this video, and I've covered it, you go check it on my channel, she literally laughs at Chad because he says he has no friends. He can't because of the way that she parents. And the other kid on the other side, they don't have any friends. She's just laughing at them. That's it. She just sits there and laughs at them. And it's the most heartbreaking thing I've ever seen because these kids are on camera being forced to talk about everything. And this is what he was doing. I think Chad did this on purpose, and I think he did on purpose well. Honestly, I believe this. If Chad hadn't have said what he said about the beanbag and all the things and saying all the stuff in the channel, I don't think we would have seen the depths of the abuse like we did. And him whistleblowing was a big deal. And she put it out there like she was all proud of it. It's crazy. Like, that's a narcissist who thinks she's right and she's not.
At one point, more than 2 million subscribers followed along with her vlog-style videos, recounting her life with husband Kevin and their 6 kids. Even then, Ruby faced some backlash for her unconventional parenting tactics.
I know that her teacher is uncomfortable with her being hungry and not having a lunch, and it would ease her discomfort if I came to the school with a lunch.
So I'm not going to ease her discomfort. We covered this video too. This is one of the big ones that really got people upset, and it should have, because she was like basically telling this teacher, too bad she could starve. She's 5. She didn't make her lunch. Imagine being the teacher and hearing that.
But I responded and just said Eve is responsible for making her lunches in the morning, and she actually told me she did pack a lunch. So the natural outcome is she's just going to need to be hungry. And hopefully nobody gives her food and nobody steps in and get.
I can't believe she said that. I'm reminded now. I did the video. I hope no one gives her food. I hope she suffers. I hope that nobody displays generosity towards my daughter. I hope not. I hope she just comes home starving, so I can be like, see what happened? Remember when she pretended to cut the head off their favorite stuffed animal and she was crying? When their kid dropped her favorite plate at the kitchen, she blamed them. Like, this woman is bananas.
Gives her a lunch.
But the real backlash and criminal charges came in 2023 after Ruby's youngest son reached out to a neighbor for help.
Hi, I was just wondering if you could do 2 favors.
Well, what are they?
Taking me to the nearest police station.
The then 12-year-old.
Every time I see that, and the guy's like, seems annoyed at first because he's a kid. Well, what are they? And then he hears, take me to the police station and can I have some water or food. And then the guy his heart breaks. And that's such a heartbreaking scene. And that scene alone right there should put Ruby in jail for 20 years plus.
Broke free from duct tape shackles around his wrists and ankles that investigators later described in great detail.
And then medical got there. They started cutting the stuff off him.
And it's not just the binding. It was that they treated it with like cayenne pepper and stuff like that to make it hurt more. It was, ugh.
And then you can see like the dark around his ankles, and it you could smell it, the flesh.
I don't know how police don't like get more upset, and I understand why they would. But like being in this situation, I would have to like I have to leave. Like I would be so upset with these people for doing this to a child. Like I don't know how they keep their composure. I mean, they're trained to, and I understand that, but damn, seeing all that.
Underneath the tape, as soon as they took it off, you can, even outside, you can smell the flesh.
At the time, the boy and his younger sister were being held in Jody's Ivins, Utah home. The emotional moments he asked for help are caught on Ring camera video, as are the moments he and his sister are finally seen by first responders.
2-2-1512. I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here at my front door asking for help. And he said he had just came from a neighbor's house and he's emaciated, he's got tape around his legs, he's hungry and he's thirsty.
Need someone immediately.
You come in, my buddy. I'm a police officer. Are you going for the union? Hey. Hey, I'm Sergeant Silver. I'm going to just get a few pictures of your
Ruby and Jody were arrested and eventually charged with 6 counts of aggravated child abuse.
Not enough.
Clark says his office wasn't familiar with either women and was shocked with the response the case brought. Had you ever heard of her before that?
I hadn't, and nobody who has worked on this case from the law enforcement side was aware of it that I've talked to either.
And again, that's going to play in her favor, by the way, because she doesn't have a criminal record. She was normal before all this stuff. And that, look, I understand sort of, and again, that's why I'm trying to like balance this. But at the same time, if you are capable of doing this, it doesn't matter if it's your first time. To me, it doesn't matter. You did it, and you admitted it, and you wrote it down. That's justice system.
So we were all kind of oblivious that we would get this media storm on this case.
Like, I could understand if justice system's like, oh, it's the first time shoplifting. Okay, well, let's, there's mitigating. Oh, it's the first time torturing a child. Well, okay, well, let's mitigate. Like, no, right? There should be a difference.
Nearly right away, Clark's team at the Washington County Attorney's Office was on the case.
So I was hearing about it probably the day after the arrests. Our special victim prosecutor team was working with officers.
Look how cocky she is when she's arrested. She's like, she honestly thought she was in this. She's like, I'm gonna get off. This is like, when they find out why I did all this stuff, they're gonna be like, well, yeah, okay, you're good to go. You can leave prison now. Like, that's what she honestly believed.
It was the day of, so they're getting calls.
The audacity of these Mormons.
They were working on warrants. We've got a crazy child abuse case. And so our office was involved that first day and having those communications back and forth with Detective Bate. But I wasn't really aware of it until the next day as we're talking about, what's going on, how are we going to handle this.
And almost right away, the case stood out.
We cover child abuse cases, right? Like, unfortunately, child abuse is something that happens in all the communities in our country. And it's something we should always be speaking out against and trying to stop. Right.
Yep.
In our office's institutional memory, we can only think of one case that is comparable to this, and that's with
Lori Vallow.
15 prosecutors.
Lori Vallow.
Collective experience. Okay, so immediately this case didn't feel normal on the, whoa, this is an awful case perspective, and for better or for worse, this case was also felt different to all the people doing the investigative work, because statistically, crime occurs and is reported more often in low-income communities, right?
It's true.
It's not that often that you have, a $2 or $3 million home in a like super secluded subdivision where you're having like you don't get domestic violence calls to that community very often, right? So that felt different. The severity felt different, and obviously, the media coverage felt different.
Clark says the first indication that the case would take the world by storm was Ruby and Jody's first appearance. It was supposed to be held virtually, but too many viewers from across the globe trying to watch caused the link to crash for everyone tuning in.
So we were getting ready to do the arraignments on these cases, and I got a call from the jail, who we work with a lot, right? So I get a call from the jail, and they say, hey, we can't log on to the system. And so we called the court, and the court said, yeah, it's full. Like, there's no, it has like, I don't know, 1,000, 1,500 people can be logged in.
I was in there.
To watch what the court streams. And our courthouse had never had it be full before. And that was when we kind of had an indication, there's a lot more interest in this than we'd ever anticipated there would be.
It wasn't until at least a month after their arrests that Clark realized what he was working with.
So those things all rolled in, most of it within the first month. The jailhouse calls obviously continued through sentencing. And then there was additional evidence that was gathered through interviews. And as we're trying to wrap our head around, I don't know if you, one of the things that we released are the Kevin Franke interviews, right? Like, as time went on and people kind of wrapped their head around what was going on, we were able to get better information from interviews, from people as to what had happened, who had been where.
You wouldn't have gotten any information about what happened to Kevin because he wasn't around. He didn't know. Even at that first interview, he's like, I trust my wife and Jody's great. And then the next interview, he's like, I hate these people, burn them in hell.
Kind of a thing. So it really was about 2 months before we really felt like we wrapped our head around what was the relationship between Ruby and Jody, what was the motive behind all this abuse.
Let's talk about that, the relationship between Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrandt. And you've been very close to the case, and your team has been covering it for months and going deep into the investigation. How would you describe their relationship?
In my mind, I see Ruby as a religious alkalite, like a blind follower of Jody. And
of the Mormon Church.
I don't think
She looks like she smells.
Like initially we were like, what is this relationship? Is there more there than a business or a friendship? I don't think there was, right? I think that this is.
There was. This is Jody's MO. Jody is the one that like is a predator towards these women. She separates them from their husbands and probably likely does things with them and convinces them to do it. Meanwhile, your husband's a sinner because he looks at corn, but let's have relations.
Two people where Jody is saying, hey, I, had a dream last night from God, and this is what we need to do today, or this is what we need to do we need to move, we need to discipline these kids, whatever it is. And Ruby was to a point in her life that she had separated herself from her husband, her extended family, her adult children. Like, she was just completely isolated.
This is a perfect picture for this too. It's just like, Ruby's like, look at me, it's all about me, I.
And so it was her minor children, and Jody were basically her contacts. And so that's kind of how I see that relationship having, and I fully believe like that's how that relationship worked, is Ruby was just waiting for Jody to tell her what Jody was thinking or feeling on any given day, and then willing to go forward and do that.
With that in mind, what do you think was Jody's motivation then in instructing Ruby to do these terrible things?
That one is harder. Like because
why don't you ask Ruby?
We deal with cases where we've had like people do awful things in the name of religion, right? And so you can kind of see like the followers. But when you have the ringleader who is just making stuff up to get people to like, I don't know if it's a power trip. I don't know if it's like narcissistic personality disorder. I don't know what it was that would lead Jody to think that. I mean, one of the things that Jody really wanted to do was to buy a ranch property in Arizona and move these kids out to the middle of nowhere so that they could discipline them further. Mm-hmm. Like, I just can't. I can't wrap my head around any motive or rational thought that would lead people to, like, and from Jody's jailhouse calls, like, I really believe that she doesn't think she's done anything wrong.
Neither does Ruby. Ruby honestly thinks the same thing.
Trying to help the children.
Until it became like, okay, I'm going to spend some time in jail, so now I have to rethink all of these things. The only reason Ruby said anything, oh, you're right, I'm wrong, is because the deal the prosecutor made here. That's it, man. That's making me mad.
And for reasons that she doesn't understand, God is sending her to be a preacher in prison.
Good luck with that.
So I think that's what's motivating her. Do I think that there's any basis in reality to any of that? Obviously not.
Clark and his team reached a plea deal with both Ruby and Jody, in which they pleaded guilty to 4 counts of aggravated child abuse each. Let's talk about the plea deal. How did all of that happen? Were you prepared to go to trial? Did you decide a plea was better? How did all that work?
Should have went to trial, man.
The advantage of the plea deals is that you don't have to put victims through the drawn outness of a long case.
That's true. That's absolutely true. And
the difficulty of a trial.
I don't care about the difficulty of a trial. I care about the difficulty of a trial and the children. I do understand that. That's I guess that's reason enough for sure. I totally understand that. But your job is to go through difficult trials. It's literally your job. And I feel like part of the justice system does this out of like, well, we got a long docket, we got everything on our plate. Let's try to get the best deal right now out of it, even if it's not going to get the justice that these kids deserve. Because it's not. It really isn't. That's my take on this whole thing. So... And it's just like they just want to go through a long drawn out trial. It's like, too bad. Go through the trial, and maybe there's a way you can go through the trial without putting the kids on there. Hopefully, getting a statement from their ad litem or something like that. I don't know, but there's got to be a way so they don't have to live through it and get on stand and do anything. I mean, there is ways. There's got to be ways. You can take statements, right? Use statements that they already gave. But I just feel like half it's, for lack of a better term, laziness. It's like, well, we don't want to. Okay.
And testifying and working through all of those things. So generally speaking, there are benefits to plea deals in victim work as long as you're still getting justice.
Agreed. And I think a lot of us would, and I guess we'll find out in 3 years if there is justice. And so he calls it justice, but we don't know. That's the problem with the Utah justice system, is the judge isn't like, okay, you guys are going away for 30 years and you're eligible for pulling like 20, whatever, right? Nothing like that happens in Utah. It's so silly. It's like, well, you could spend up to 60 years in jail or 30 years in jail or 15 years in jail, but we'll find out in 3 years when you're up for your first parole for the first charge. Or they get one year per count, 4 years, right? And that seems so stupid. Nobody gets justice. These kids don't know in 3 years if their mother's going to get out or not. That's, I think, putting them through more unnecessary problems, right? And that they have to relive this every 4 years possibly, until they're paroled. I think that's worse. Get it all done right out of the way. Like, I understand people are like, well, it's going to put kids in the situation and then there's court and everything else. And look, I know, I get that, but that's the justice that they're going to get in the end if you were allowed this to go on. They probably would have got charged with a lot more, in my opinion. I'm torn because, yeah, of course you don't want to put the kids through more trauma. But if it gets them more justice, then,
In this case, Utah law puts a lid on the high end of how much time they can do in prison is 30 years. And so they could,
why is there ever a lid on anything? Why do you have a lid? Why is there a lid? If you do atrocious things, especially to children, why is there a lid? Well, there should be no lids. If you do crazy things like torture children, there should not be a limit to the amount of time you spend in prison. You shouldn't be put under the ground, first of all. But we need a lid. Why?
They could have pled to 100 counts of aggravated child abuse, and they still would have been a max of 30 years. So
that's so stupid. So you could have nobody's like, okay, but why? So you could have pled to 100 counts of this and still only got maximum 30 years. So no matter what you do in Utah, you're ever only going to get 30 years. How does that stop crime?
So we needed to make sure that we had the ability to get to that threshold so that the parole board can hold these women for as long as they feel like is appropriate.
Yeah, so this is stupid.
So we got there.
And how much you want to bet the parole board's all Mormon?
And the other part of the plea deal is, well, then there's the number of counts that you work on, but there's also what does the prison sentence look like? Mm-hmm. Under the Utah sentencing matrix, if you're a first-time offender of aggravated child abuse, there's a presumption that you're not doing jail or prison.
Okay. Why? I'll never understand the justice system. That's why I'm a pleb. Like, I just don't see the justice in it. So, because it's your first time, you're like, again, I'm glad that she's gone to jail, but because it's your first time, we're like, okay. Why does that even come to play?
That it's just a probation case, which is mind-blowing. I'm not defending it in any way, shape, or form.
Exactly.
Right? But that's where the matrix was at. Obviously, this is a horrific case, not a run-of-the-mill case. And so what we negotiated in the plea deal was they'd plead to 4 of the 6 counts, and they would agree to prison for each of those, and the prison would run consecutive, so then we get to a 4-year minimum.
Not enough.
In our mind, that was a justice was served.
Your mind is wrong.
At sentencing,
your mind is wrong.
Heard from both defendants.
Thank you to the Washington County Prosecutor's Office, Ryan Shaw, the legal assistants and discovery clerks. Eric Clark, you exemplified to me how justice and mercy are meant to coexist. My charges are just. They offer safety to my family, accountability
against you,
to the public.
Accountability to the public? What?
And they did show mercy to me, to my babies.
You don't get to sit here and say to my babies. You don't get to sit there. No. You get wrecked. Ruby.
My 6 little chicks.
My 6 little chicks? Is that what she just said? Is that really what she just said in front of these people? And then don't forget, during this, she's calling Kevin and being like, this is like, they're all in cahoots with Sherry. Is she one of your chicks?
I was the MANOTICK, who was consistently watering me to safety. For years, I was in a deep undercurrent that led us to danger. I remember when she took diagnosed knowingly. I was so disoriented that I believed
I can't hear anything she's saying. She's a clown.
dark was light and right was wrong. I would do anything in this world for you.
Except to hear, I would do anything in this world for you, including torture you.
My willingness to sacrifice all for you was masterfully manipulated into something very ugly.
Okay, can't even hear it. I know what's going on with their audio. It's garbage.
All that was soft and safe and good. I took from your mother. How terrifying this must have been for you.
Can't hear anything she's saying. I'm just like, forget it.
They're in the courtroom.
I'm sorry.
During the sentencing, obviously you're there in the courtroom, so you hear from both Jody and Ruby. What do you make of their statements?
Ruby's surprised me, and I didn't expect that because we've been hearing her jailhouse calls, right? So the thing
exactly
that she said, I believe that to a significant degree that was all heartfelt, right? Like I think that
no, that was an act.
She really does feel awful and realize that what she was doing was horrific. We've never had
okay, that's great, but still did it.
A sentencing like that where someone's gone through and thanked all of the different government actors.
Yeah, and that's an act, right? We've never had that. That's because she's calculated. And how dumb are you not to see through that?
And so I was just in there feeling surprised, right? I was like, oh, this is different, you know, and we're all trying to have poker faces because it's a big media story. And we expected Ruby to be very remorseful. And I think that what we got was more than what we expected.
Cares? Again, who cares? She still did this.
And probably longer than what we expected.
The woman's been acting on her channel for like 10 years. You don't take that into consideration? She's been showing everybody what she thinks they want to see for 10 years. Meanwhile, these kids have been living in absolute garbage for the last 10 years. And you don't take that into consideration. She's just an actor. She's been doing it. She's so good at it. She made millions of dollars doing it.
I sincerely love these children.
No, you don't.
I desire for them to heal physically and emotionally. One of the reasons I did not go to trial is that I did not want them to emotionally relive the experience which would have been detrimental to them.
No, the reason you made this deal is because you want to get the least amount of prison time. When she's speaking to her attorney, he says, this is how you're going to get the least amount of jail time. Even Ruby was talking about with Kevin. She was going through all the things, and she's telling him all about that, or was it her sister, about all of how she's going to mitigate spending less time in prison. That's all they care about. It wasn't because you care about these kids. You don't care. You just want to spend the least amount of time in prison as you can.
My hope and prayer is that they will heal and move forward to have beautiful lives. I am willing to submit to what the state feels would be an appropriate amount of time served to make retribution as an outcome.
With Jody, we could have had an office pool as to how many words we thought she was going to say, you know, because she still wasn't admitting she'd done anything wrong, and we didn't think that she would. Like I don't know that she ever will.
She sort of did there.
And so, what do you say in sentencing if you're not willing to really admit to stuff? So we were curious what Jody was going to say. And then I think everybody, like we felt the same emotions everybody else felt. When you don't admit guilt and you say you love the kids and wish them the best, like it just kind of makes you want to vomit in your mouth.
Yeah, agreed. And I also believe that's what Ruby was doing too. So I don't care if Ruby was crying. Again, she's just an actor. She's had way more practice at this than Jody has. And he sees that he's giving Ruby way more credit than she's due. Right? He's like being way more lenient on her. But if you look at her journals and everything else, and I'm not saying you should be more lenient on Jody either. I'm saying they're both equally guilty, if not Ruby. On the abuse side, it was Ruby admitting to doing the abuse, the physical part of it, and being tricked by Jody, which I understand is bad, obviously. Like we've had lots of serial killers in the past who take people like this and do that. You know what I mean? Manson type of thing. But by her own account, she was the one doing it. and he's given her way more leniency than he is to Jody.
Right.
Clark himself spoke at sentencing and made a stark comparison about the Franke children's abuse.
The state respectfully requests that the court sentence Ms. Franke to consecutive prison terms for each of the 4 counts of aggravated child abuse. This sentence was agreed to by Ms. Franke in her plea agreement and is also recommended by adult probation and parole. She committed horrible acts of child abuse. From May to August in 2023, Ms. Franke and her business partner held her 2 children, ages 9 and 11, turning 12, in a concentration camp-like setting.
Yep.
The children were regularly denied food, water, beds to sleep in, and virtually all forms of entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
They were isolated from others and were hidden when people came to visit the house where the children and the defendants
physically assaulted
were staying.
Now we've seen the photos that were so chilling and harrowing even to look at. And we've seen the videos of the young kids so emaciated and having open wounds. You've compared it to a concentration camp. Do you stand by that?
So I got a little bit of pushback from a super thoughtful person who reached out to us and said, hey, when you compare stuff to concentration camps, you like weaken what happened in the Holocaust. And that...
Yeah, but at the same time, is it warranted? Because like a lot happened to these kids. A lot. But yeah, I can understand that.
That's not my impression or intention in it at all, right? Like, I was really struggling because we couldn't release stuff to the public yet.
Yeah.
And I was needing to describe what had happened in the courtroom setting. And I had no frame of reference for that, people looking like kids looking that bad and being forced to do, because even while they were that emaciated and they were still being required to do physical tasks out in the sun for hours and hours and hours at a time.
Yep.
And the only frame of reference that I have in my mind is concentration camp stories from the Holocaust for that, right? So I don't, and it was religiously motivated, right? Yeah. So I think that there are some parallels there. I don't want to be saying this was, the equivalent of that, because they're very different things. But it's hard to find a frame of reference for this.
Gitmo, they were treated like prisoners, like terrorists. Make that comparison.
The starvation, the physical demands, the religious nature. It's hard to find a frame of reference because this is just so outside of bounds of what normal society would do.
Both women were sentenced up to 30 years in prison, but it's still unclear exactly how long they'll serve for. I know it's up to the Utah Board of Parole and Probation to determine really how long Ruby and Jody are going to spend behind bars. What do you expect as far as how long they really will be in prison?
Yeah, here we go.
I don't really have a guess for that.
I do.
I hope, and I've said this in other settings, right? But I hope that they stay in prison until the community is safe, they're no longer a threat, and the victims in this case are both adult and in an emotional place to where they can figure out how to deal with their mom.
Okay, and I'm glad he's saying that, and I agree completely with that. Then why would you make a deal where you wouldn't make that happen? Where you'd be like, no, I'm going to come to the parole board and make sure that they hear everything you did. You say the words, and that's great, and I agree. But why would you then make the deal that could potentially cause it so that Ruby is out sooner?
Being out of prison. That's my hope. Whether that happens or not, I really wouldn't know where to guess anywhere between that 4 to 30. I don't know where the board's going to fall on this one. And I don't know how much of an impact, we'll try to have an impact on that on Jody. Part of Ruby's plea deal is that we wouldn't try to have an impact on that. We wouldn't be submitting information or going up and arguing to the board. With Jody, we will be submitting information. We may be going up and arguing to the board if we want to see clear evidence.
This is what's mind-blowing to me. Okay, yes, but both should get equal treatment. If you really want to put it on paper who was doing the abuse, it was Ruby then. So make it make sense to me. Maybe I'm missing something. Ruby did most of it.
that she's not going to come out and try to gather more followers and convince them to do, not like obviously the horrific abuse, but just
I think Jody's going to die in jail.
Telling people to isolate, telling people to follow her without question. Like, we don't need that in our community.
In the end, Clark says he and his office are still working to cope with the case, finding new ways to see the bright side.
Everybody copes with cases in different ways. I cope by looking for silver linings. There are some cool things there's nothing cool about prior to today that the 12-year-old boy escaped, right? Nothing redeeming before that. But there are a lot of neat things that we get to see when we get to be like in the guts of it all.
There's duct tape around each ankle.
There's swords around them.
Yeah, there's sores around them.
There's no silver lining in this. I'm sorry. No, there's not.
I think
No.
the chance he's been...
And he also has...
Oh, and he has one around his ankle.
as well.
Yes,
Prosecutors are working for the state, right? They're not working for law firms. They work for the state.
this as well. Okay, this boy has been...
Needs immediate attention. Oh.
And like again, that's why the justice system kind of sucks, because prosecutors are like, well, I'm beholden to the public and I have to tell this is my docket and this is what I did and I have to have success in these, and it's all about metrics and everything else, and a lot of times justice just falls through the cracks because of the metrics. And I'm telling you, it's the prosecutors. Like, really, he thinks this is a win. It's not a win, man. Like, it's a win that they get some jail time, and he's trying to say, well, in most cases I just get on parole, and they see this as a win, but the rest of us see this as no way, and we've been calling this out for years. It's not a win. If she gets out in 3.5 years, is that going to be a win?
He was such a good kid.
This kid is probably sleeping. I think he's sleeping.
I think that the ring footage of the couple that responded, they called 911, and they want to remain anonymous, and that is 100% their right?
Yep.
Like,
yep.
They don't want to be involved in this, and I'm not trying to draw media attention to them. But watching how none of us are trained to deal with that, right? They just get a kid on their doorstep, and you watch how they try to put him at ease, try to get help there. They're not grilling him, they're not re-traumatizing him in any way, right? Like, they're just trying to get enough information that they can get the right kind of help. And then the law enforcement and the EMTs and how they come in and are able to help that boy. And then they go and they spend over 3 hours sitting in the closet with the girl, trying to help her feel comfortable, right? These are children who were completely brainwashed at that time, who believed that they deserved the abuse, that they belonged in jail, that police were going to be bad and take them away from their family, that hospitals were going to be bad and give them shots that were going to kill them. Like, they had been taught to distrust all institutions.
And you'll see that in the Pam Botcher video with the cops. You'll see that with the other kids. They've been completely conditioned to be like, police aren't going to be here to help you. They're going to take you away from your family.
And these caring police officers and EMTs are able to help those kiddos feel comfortable enough that they get them to voluntarily come out of that awful environment they were in. Especially the girl in the closet, right? They just wait patiently until she's there. And it still took her some time, right? Like, her initial interview with us, about the only thing she said is, if I talk to you, it's going to make my repentance process harder.
Oh, that's so heartbreaking. Oh my gosh. And you want this woman out early.
Which is heartbreaking, right? But the people that were able to show these kids care and to help meet their physical needs and start working on their emotional needs, it's really remarkable when the system can work that way to respond to something that's this dire. And nobody, like I said at the beginning, nobody that was involved was aware that this was going to be a high-profile case at that point. They were just trying to do their job and help these victims that they were looking at and that their hearts were breaking for. And I think that's an amazing part of the story. And it's a shout out to first responders, right? But it's also a powerful reminder of how much good there is in neighbors and in people that sit in the back of ambulances for a living. There's people that sit in police patrol cars for a living and do these hard work.
I'll give them that.
A lot of times they're just such amazing people, and they get to really impact lives for good. And that's cool, right? Like, that's a silver lining to a really sad story.
I asked Clark how the Franke children are doing now, and he wouldn't give me specifics, but did say he's optimistic about their recovery. Reporting for Long Crime.
Yes, so is Bonnie. I think they'll recover. He's right. You know, in some cases, and I understand it more. Again, for me, I understand it. I don't agree with it, right? I understand that prosecutors have to get a win, and this is considered a win. In the world that they work in and the parameters that they work under, I understand that. The red tape and the bureaucracy, I guess as us humans, we just have to deal with it, and we can disagree with it, but that's the way this world works. And all we can do as people is protest if we want, peacefully. When it comes time for her to have a parole, I bet you they're not even going to tell you when it is, because they know that people will protest this case. But hopefully we can find out when that is and protest. That is our right as people who want to see justice, is to get out there in the streets and put public pressure on these people to keep them behind bars. But there is one thing he did say there in the end. I was like, there's no silver lining, but he's right. There is a silver lining. That there is still hope in the world when people are good people who will do good things. I know the neighbors, again, he said they don't want to be in this and they want privacy, but props to them. Props to them. I mean, a couple of cases I've covered in Real Crime on my channel, it's just passerbys, like Red, White, and Bethune, that channel that found the white van. That broke the whole entire story. It's just people living their life, right? There are people still willing to do that, and I think us here, we would be those types of people too. And you being here and concerned and upset with this stuff and hating child exploitation and all that kind of stuff, these are the types of people that warm the cold, dead cockles of my heart. Because we would be those people that would help. And I know a lot of people would be like, well, what are we doing here? We're just snarking on people and that stuff, but we raise awareness. And I know I hate that stupid phrase. I hate it. Okay, but it really is what we're doing here. We are bringing awareness to to child exploitation, which needs to be and is absolutely in the forefront of a lot of people's conversations right now in the law and on social media and everywhere. And it's really, really hitting right now. And that's been huge leaps and bounds since we started this and step into cases like this. It's culminated into seeing Ruby go to jail for something that she did that's crazy. And so I want to thank you for being here for these types of conversations. This is really, really important. Now, what do you think below in the comments? I understand it, but like, am I missing something? Or are you upset with me that she's likely not going to get as much jail and that Jody got more? Do you think Jody deserves to be more? Or do you think they equally deserve to have justice served in the same way? You know, maybe there's a little more nuance. I understand that. So let me know what you think below. Everybody, take a deep breath. Yeah, we're going to keep covering this. Still so much more to cover. And I don't think it's over. I think, Jody's going to probably write a book. Ruby's going to write a book. Ruby's going to write books and make money and all that stuff, get rewarded for this. And there's going to be documentaries made about this. And there already is 2020s out there. And it's going to be something we got to keep talking about because we got to keep this really fresh. You got someone like Ren and Ellen or Jacqueline, what's her face, out there who was getting hammered by this stuff. And now she's just all of a sudden back. We can't let that continue to be. We can't forget about this stuff that goes on and these kids are exploited. And we won't. And thank you for being here. You are incredible. And I will see you when I see you.